This is a prepaid debit call from...
I am the Kyle.
Well, I'm getting ready to share with you yet another absolutely insane series here on After Prison Show called Phone Calls with a Killer. What a rabbit hole I have gone down as of late, and I think it's going to be one that you find quite a bit of interest in. I need to paint the backstory for this individual I'm getting ready to introduce you to. I ran across this guy named Kyle through a prisoner pen pal website called Wire of Hope. I was just looking on these prisoner pen pal websites, seeing who I would run across, maybe people that I knew, or maybe people that looked interesting and would lead to more. Kyle Hulbert is a 42-year-old guy who looks quite interesting based on these couple of prison pictures that accompany his pen pal listing. And as if a picture's not worth 1,000 words by itself, the words that he would write in relation to this pen pal listing certainly sparked my interest about this guy even more. Ha! Victory is mine. I finally managed to wriggle out of my Technicolor straitjacket and have successfully distracted the screws with contraband XXX nudie mags. But wait, here's a delightful conundrum. Now that I've got my opportunity to tell you about myself, just what am I to say that will compel you to take that dizzying first step into the great unknown of a brand spanking new friendship? There's so much to say. Where do I begin? Oh, I know. Hi, free world peoples waving energetically. I am the Kyle. That is going to be synonymous here. That is going to be ringing a bell as this series progresses, because every time I accept a call from the level 4 prisoner where Kyle is at, and I'm told who it is that's calling me, I hear the same message. Hello?
Hello. This is a prepaid debit call from...
I am the Kyle.
I am the Kyle. And the bestest friend you ever had. The Kyle isn't just a name, though. It's a state of mind. With that guy your mother warned you about, that's ironic considering what this guy is locked up for. A hyperactive, super cool, awesome wild card with a wicked Cheshire grin, devastating charm, and way more imagination, curiosity, and free time than can possibly be good for either of us. I may be barking mad, but your life is definitely going to be more interesting because of it. Come on. Give in to the happy, happy, joy, joy dance. You know you want to. Can you see how eclectic, how crazy, horrible choice of words right there this pen pal listing portrays this guy to be? As I was reading this for the very first time, and it was this post that I first started to learn about this guy, Kyle Hulbert, that I realized this guy had a really good way with words. And whatever he was incarcerated for, he probably could share about that in a very articulate type of way. When you think about prison stories and people sharing their experiences, the more articulate you're able to expound upon those experiences, the more you're able to put a person right there with you, the better and more hard-hitting those prison stories ultimately end up being. That's why I'm so good at telling prison stories, and Jay Williams is so good at telling prison stories, and others are as well. But others, I don't know, but I imagine there's others who don't tell them so well. They just hit on the facts. They don't hit on the smells, the taste, the thoughts, the emotion. I'm getting completely off track. This guy has a way with words. That was the first thing that struck me, aside from how interesting he looked. Doesn't look like a convict. He looks like a nerd, but he looks like he's probably in prison for something crazy. Are you fun and interesting, or even better, really strange? Do you giggle uncontrollably at wildly inappropriate moments for no reason at all? Do you desperately wish your life was more like your favorite anime? Are you crazy for all things Japanese? Do you believe the world would be a better place if more people lightened up and gave in to whimsical flights and fancy or random acts of senseless beauty? Is there way too much blood in your caffeine system? Do you have tattoos, piercings, or body modifications? And if so, will you show them to me? Do you have lots of awesome, interesting, or exotic pets? Do you have a job doing something wickedly cool? Are you a tortured soul expressing yourself through art, poetry, music, or photography? Do you believe in magic, dragons, or fairies? Have you ever been abducted by aliens or wish you had been? Obviously, this guy is tuning in to his specific wheelhouse. He certainly knows who he's going after with this. Probably those who are just as crazy as maybe he is. Do you search for the impossible in everyday life? Do you know deep in your heart that there is more to this world beyond sight and sound and touch? Are you a pathetically hopeless romantic with more optimistic idealism than is probably good for you? Do you have room in your life for the madcap antics of a slightly demented, caffeine-addled eccentric? Then why the frack aren't you writing me yet? Folks, this pen pal listing would certainly hook, line, and sinker yours truly. I need to say this from the very beginning. Don't form any thoughts about this guy until you've heard all that I'm getting ready to share with you. And then also in this video, the first of this series, you really need to hear everything that I'm getting ready to share with you and this guy's story before you formulate any type of thoughts. Because I want to put one cliffhanger out there, one rage bait thought out there as I begin this. You may hear all of this and may find yourself feeling sorry for this killer. I shit you not. That ain't even clickbait. Also, you'll notice that I don't beat around the bush about what this guy is and has done. He has done exactly that. He's killed somebody in a very horrific way. But there is so much to this guy's story, so much that you're getting ready to begin hearing about today. If you're into this, and I hope that you are, go ahead and hit that like button, leave a comment, let me know what your thoughts are thus far. If you're not subscribed to After Prison Show, you're stumbling across this video, definitely hit that subscribe and bell notification. You're not going to want to miss any of this. I promise you. Who in the hell is this guy, Kyle Hulbert? For the third time, I run across this guy for the very first time from this prisoner pen pal website called Wire of Hope, where I run across those pictures and that post, but I can see his sentence information as well. They share that right there. He's been incarcerated since 2001. He is serving a life sentence without parole. His earliest release is not available. And his conviction is for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Before I even really start to learn about this guy's crime, I do a little more digging, and I learn that where he's at right now is at a prison called Buckingham Correctional Facility in the state of Virginia. It's a level 4 facility. Ironically, there's another notable name who is there with him as well. Somebody I haven't gotten the opportunity to speak to just yet, but I will, and that's going to be an entirely different thing than this particular series. A guy that you may have heard the name of and maybe have even seen some content of by the name of Red Onion Randy. Red Onion Randy, what little I know of him, has a sentence of over 1,000 years in prison, and he's literally doing a podcast from prison. If you haven't seen him, you need to check him out. Because as I begin to go down the rabbit hole in relation to Kyle Hulbert, one of the first things that I stumble across is the fact that him and Red Onion Randy are in the same prison together, Buckingham, and Red Onion Randy has begun to feature Kyle Hulbert on his channel with his content. And when I tell you that some of the things that this guy has shared about over on Red Onion Randy's channel is as extreme as it gets. Look at a guy like this. What could you imagine his time would be like, especially first getting to prison? When I tell you that the worst you could imagine happening to a guy looking like this is exactly what he shares about happened to him, go check out Red Onion Randy's content for more in relation to that. But don't do it just yet. Hear me out on this video first. Without even knowing much of this guy, it starts with the Wire of Hope pen pal listing. It leads me to Red Onion Randy's YouTube channel and a very graphic story involving this guy when he first got to prison in the early 2000s. The worst imaginable taking place. I then begin to look up Kyle's case. Kyle would end up killing a man, and not just any man neither. This was a high-profile case that ironically never had a Dateline episode, a 2020 episode. I'm sure that a couple of true crime podcast YouTube channels have covered Kyle's case. And as a matter of fact, there was one that I would run across that I would listen to the entirety of. It was completely AI generated. However, it was very interesting in sharing more in relation to Kyle's case. However, I talked to Kyle about this podcast episode that he never even knew existed. That's going to be coming later in this series. And wait until you hear what he says about some of the things that were mentioned in relation to his crime. It's crazy. I'm going to link this episode that I watched down below so you can check that out. I'm also going to link Red Onion Randy down below so you can check that out as well too. Let me give you the gist of Kyle's murder charge. In December of 2021, a renowned scientist by the name of Robert Shorts was found murdered inside his rural Virginia home. His body arranged in a way that immediately made investigators suspect an occult ritual. Dr. Robert Schultz was stabbed to death by use of what was referred to as a 2-foot-long sword. He was stabbed multiple times. Allegedly, according to this true crime documentary, even an X was carved in the back of his neck. And it was Kyle who carried out this murder. But he didn't act alone in this situation. You see, the daughter of Dr. Robert Schultz would also be implicated and charged with first-degree murder as well. And it was the daughter of this renowned scientist, a girl at the time, a college girl at the time, 18 years old, by the name of Clara Schwartz, who would put Kyle to carrying out this heinous act because she convinced Kyle that she was being abused and that there was no way out for her. And when you hear something like that, you think to yourself, okay, whatever. Maybe you've even heard stories that sound eerily similar to this. I feel like I have. I've never gotten an opportunity to speak to somebody who actually was involved in this in such a way that Kyle was. Kyle was the killer. In 2001, Kyle meets Clara Schwartz. She convinces him that she is being abused by her father and there's no way out, and that Kyle has to kill Dr. Robert Schultz. Kyle was the right one for the job and unfortunately would carry out this heinous crime. On the surface, it seems pretty cut and dry. Murder for hire, somewhat, not really. Kyle didn't get any type of financial benefit from this. This was just somebody Kyle thought was a friend of his. And I'm not trying to pity party you here. I mentioned early in this video, you may end up feeling sorry for this guy. We haven't gotten anywhere just yet. I want you to keep in mind what I shared with you in relation to the pen pal listing. I want you to keep in mind what I'm sharing with you right here. In 2001, Kyle was 18 years old. He meets Clara Schwartz and 2 other individuals, a group of friends. Kyle was an outsider and a lone wolf. He was into role play, cosplay, all things that most of us might consider weird. But aside from that, you need to further understand Kyle's life prior to December of 2001 to understand why all of this hits so much differently. I began to correspond with Kyle through email. That quickly led to phone calls. Early into the conversations between Kyle and I, which again I'll be sharing in this beginning here today, Kyle shared with me that he was a writer and that he had many different things that he wrote posted to social media, but he also had things that were shared and posted by publications, one of which was Mad in America. I run across Kyle's Facebook page. I run across that Mad in America story that he had posted, which was called The Great Gray Beast. I want to read this to you. It was reading this that really opened my eyes quite a bit to who this guy was. The Great Gray Beast by Kyle Hulbert was published on December the 8th, 2023. My name is Kyle Hulbert. I am no one's son, the boy nobody knew. I am the Demetrius of the Great Gray Beast that is the American psychiatric system. I was born in 1983. That might not be particularly important in and of itself, but it's the beginning, so that's where we'll start. I'm not sure what happened in the first 3 years of my life to prompt it, but when I was 3, I began receiving medications for what has only ever been described in my records as alarming behavior. What behaviors a 3-year-old can present that would prompt doctors to give the same kind of medications given to adult schizophrenics, I cannot tell you. What I can tell you is that in 1986, child psychopharmacology was not what it is now. Knowing what they know now, no competent doctor would give such medications to a child. At 3 years old, this guy was being given the same type of medication that was being given to adult schizophrenics because of alarming behavior. This starts off insane. What I remember most about growing up is confusion, anger, and fear. I knew there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know what. None of the grown-ups seemed to either. That's what was the most bewildering and frustrating part, that they didn't have any answers for what was going on. Not my father, not my grandparents, not my teachers, not the doctors who I kept getting taken to. As a child, you look to grown-ups for everything. They're supposed to protect you, guide you, and help you navigate your life. But I was alone. I was alone with the voices and alone with the visions. I was alone with the inexplicable, the uncontrollable emotional outburst, and the gnawing guilt that always followed them. I was scared of what was going on with me, scared of not feeling like I could control my mind, and angry that despite my best efforts, I couldn't seem to get the hang of being a good kid. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, it was only ever a matter of time before I found myself sitting in front of an adult being asked the same damnable questions. Why did this happen? Why did you do that? What's wrong with you? I remember wanting to scream from sheer frustration. How the hell was I supposed to answer any of that? You're the grown-ups, you tell me. Much of my childhood was spent trying to avoid drawing attention to myself because I didn't want to be asked questions I had no way of answering, but that the wardens of my life seemed to expect me to be able to. I existed with a constant feeling of failure, of frustration, of fear. I didn't want to be a problem child, but I didn't know how to stop being one for everyone around me. As it happens with many inconvenient problems, it was only a matter of time before I was sent away. I was 6 the first time I was placed in a psychiatric facility. It became a mainstay of my life up until I was emancipated at age 18. Folks, you need to be holding on to your frickin' seats as I share this with you. There is nothing I can write or say that will enable you to understand what it's like being inside the Great Gray Beast, the vicarious, ravenous, utterly insatiable. The worst of it isn't the enforced medication regimen or the shots or isolation. It's the way that beast devours you by degrees, by inches. You're eaten away little by little every single day until what's left of you is barely a person. Between hospitalizations, I bounced between my biological family until ultimately I became a ward of the state at about the age of 12. By 12 years old, his family just said, he's your problem now. Then it was foster and group homes. When your life is a giant game of hot potato, you learn to live on your toes, always ready to pack up and go at a moment's notice. Those moments came too quickly, too often, to ever allow me to form any of the emotional bonds that so many people around me enjoyed. I grew up in the belly of that beast, never looking forward to anything because really, what was the point? I focused on what enjoyment I could eat from each moment, from the small victories I achieved. Reading was my escape, that and writing stories about lives I would never live. In 1999, I was placed in what I thought was my permanent foster home. I thought I'd finally escaped the beast. The family really tried, and with them, I enjoyed the longest consecutive period of freedom in my life. But in March 2001, things went sideways, and I heard the growl from the beast, felt its shadow eclipsing me once again. It had never been far, and it wasn't done with me. The powers that be were convinced that I was in crisis. I thought I had been doing so well, but they told me I was suffering from dissociative episodes, that I was delusional and a threat to myself and others, and I needed intensive therapy. So they sent me back to the asylum. They fed me back to that gray beast that had been devouring me since I was a child. I never escaped it. June came, and my 18th hatching day, that's a weird way of saying your birthday, June came, and my 18th hatching day was only a couple of months away. The powers that be began speaking of a new thing. They began speaking of emancipation. Wait, what? Emancipation? Does that mean I'll be free? No more of this? No more hospitalizations? No more award of the state? No more being chewed on by that beast? No more having to answer the same damn questions I didn't have answers to 10 years ago and still don't have now? Hell to the yesness. Yes to all of that. But wait, what about my psychosis? What about the delusions and my dissociative episodes you were so worried about? Good questions. Those I didn't know to ask them. I was about to turn 18, and I had been told that after a lifetime of being choked on a short leash, I was to be set free from the great gray beast that I feared would never let me go. My only thought was of freedom. I had no way of knowing at the time and wouldn't learn about it until I was already in prison. But as soon as my father heard they were talking about emancipating me, he went to war with the psychiatric board in charge of my case. Even with our estranged years before, he kept tabs on me. He tried to convince them to keep me. He told them I had nowhere to live, that I didn't know how to take care of myself. He told them that if they let me out on the streets without any kind of monitoring or oversight, I'd end up killing someone within 100 days. How crazy is that? Your biological father telling a psychiatric facility, a board, that if you let him go, within 100 days, he's going to end up killing somebody? They didn't listen to him. I was turning 18. They told him I had exhibited no significant psychotic episodes in the last month or so, and that I was perfectly suited for release. Me, a 17-year-old psychiatric patient who had spent the majority of his life as a ward of the state with no life experience and nowhere to live except the tent he owned and the couches of the few friends he'd made during his last stint in foster care. Me, a kid whose list of diagnoses include schizoaffective disorder and manic depressive disorder, and who'd been taking medications for them since before he could read, I was perfectly suited for release. Funny how all of my psychosis seemed to clear up just as soon as I was old enough to be emancipated, don't you think? There's no way I should have been released when I was 18. I wasn't prepared to live on my own, and they knew it. Just because I had a month of good behavior did not suddenly make me cured. The responsible thing would have been to keep me a ward of the state, transfer me into adult social services, and ensure that I was released only after I had demonstrated an ability to provide for myself. That would have been the responsible thing to do, not give me a bus ticket and a 3-month prescription for my antipsychotic medication and hope for the best. I was emancipated on September the 4th, 2021, 2 days after my 18th hatching day. I'd stopped taking my medication by mid-October. I killed Dr. Robert Schwartz on December the 8th, 2001. I was arrested for it on December the 12th. 99 days. Is how long he made it in the free world. His father said, you let him go, he'll kill somebody within 100 days. 99 days it took for that to be true. I have never blamed my mental illness for what happened that night. I have never shrieked my responsibility for what I've done. But it cannot be denied that what I was then is a direct result of that great gray beast being allowed to have its way, being allowed to devour a child by those with the power to do more, but who chose to do less because it was easier, to feast upon a child's youth and innocence, only spitting it out because it had legally become an adult, and to keep it any longer would mean more expenses. My name is Kyle Hulbert. I am no one's son. the boy nobody knew. And I am not the only child to have been devoured by that great gray beast. It's too late for me. It's not too late for them. Just let that sink in. That's all I got to say. This is already a really long introduction to this series. Jesus, Joe, it took you 30 minutes to get to. Hey, listen, I needed to paint this picture as vividly with so much to consider as we get into this series. Phone calls with a killer and a guy you may actually end up feeling sorry for. Kyle would end up receiving a life sentence plus an additional, I think, 10 years or something like that. Kyle was going to go to trial. He was going to plead insanity. And if ever anybody had a justifiable fight for an insanity plea, how about a guy whose medical jacket dates back to 3 years old when medication first started getting introduced? A guy who legitimately grew up in a psychiatric facility. For whatever reason, an insanity plea would not be. Kyle had a public defender. I'm not saying, what Kyle did was any type of way justifiable. But you gotta wonder, at least I do, there's so much more to be shared, to shed more light on this individual. I hope that through this series, I'm able to bring more attention to him, to also Red Onion Randy. But what I'm getting ready to share with you here now are the first 2 phone calls that I had with Kyle Hulbert. And there is a lot more to be looking forward to in relation to this series. Get ready for Phone Calls with a Killer as I introduce you to Kyle Hulbert.
So hopefully we'll be doing this, several years from now. We'll still be talking. Hopefully we'll be FaceTiming or whatever the hell they're calling it nowadays, and I'll be out there. But still.
That is crazy to hear you say it like that. You've been locked up since 2001, and you haven't seen anything.
No. I actually when I got here to Buckingham, I was here for about. I was in COD for about 20 minutes for a friend of mine that I knew from other facilities I've been at. He pulled up on me and he gave me a JP6 flare and says, go to your cell and I'll see you in a couple hours. Okay. I went in and they jailbroke the tablets. So there was porn and video games and shit on it. I was like, holy fuck. Seeing the fucking they had emulators on there for like PlayStation, DS, and so I spent a bunch of time. Somebody was like, "Hey, $250, you can get one of these." I was like, "Yeah, okay, hold on, let me call my brother."
Man, wow.
23 years in the mountains, and it was not even knowing this existed. I got here and they're like, "Hey, for $250, you get porn and movies and cartoons and shows and video games." Yeah, yes, please.
Man, listen, just like I said, so much that we can discuss. And like you had said, I'm hopeful that this is the beginning, of quite a bit of conversation and camaraderie here. I want to start this off by saying what I do, I share experiences, my own personal experience where it began from. I served 7 years myself. I came home in 2015. Obviously nothing compared to you or many others that I've gotten the opportunity to feature. And I started After Prison Show. It was really big at one time. It's not so big anymore. However, people still watch this. They get a kick out of it. So what you and the other guy, Red Onion Randy, are doing, I know that I can get some additional eyes on the both of you respectfully, but I want to start with you. I want to start with you first of all. I run across your pen pal listing, and just based off of your appearance and the way that you wrote that, I knew that there was something. I knew that there was something with you. And I go down this rabbit hole. I look you up. I see a little bit in relation to your case. I didn't even really get deep into it. I understand the gist of it. And then that led me to that led me to Red Onion Randy. That's when I seen that you and Red Onion Randy had began to feature your story. And I watched the hard-hitting episode where you talked about when you first got to prison, cannot even begin to fathom what you have gone through. But even more, last night, as a matter of fact, I just read your article in that Mad, whatever that thing is called, Mad
in America.
Mad in America. I read the article that you wrote about your life, and man, I have never been more moved by what you wrote in relation to being 3 years old, first being administered, psychiatric medication at 3 years old. And,
you have to forgive me. I'm kind of eating my lunch while I'm talking to you. I just got back from religious service. I was like, I want sour cream and cheddar chips, damn it.
No worries. That's
the crunching here.
I read this, and when I read it, I mean, I was just so compelled by it because I remember the first email that you sent me, I think it was yesterday or the day before, we just literally got in contact. But you had mentioned, your hope is to get clemency. And I hear this time and time again from guys, okay, hey, it's a long shot. But your case, my God, man, I mean, the amount of psychiatric treatment that you went through your entire life. If ever there was a case that deserved to be looked at in relation to clemency, I truly believe it's a case like yours.
I mean, the one thing I have never done, and I've never done, and this is something that's been pointed out to me, I didn't even realize I was doing it. A couple of people who I've talked to over the years, I did a podcast for Bethany Jones, the Pros and Cons podcast, a few years ago, and she was one of the first people in the press. She goes, the thing that sets you apart from everybody that I've met, because she's been talking to prisoners for years and years and years, she was like, you have never once tried to hide behind your mental health as, it's not my fault because I'm crazy. It's not, I never tried to make excuses for what happened. I've owned it from the very beginning. I was fucked up in the head, yes. Was I manipulated? Yes. All that and above, as my ex-wife used to say. But at the end of the day, I did something horrible, something I can't take back. But the worst thing I've ever done in my life should not be the most defining moment of my life. That's why I write. That's why I started my Substack. Have you seen my Substack thing yet?
I did look at it briefly. I didn't spend a lot of time. I don't even understand it. As a guy who's been out in the world and understands, social media and websites, I looked at it. I'm not familiar with it. I mean, I know that you have that. I just didn't spend a lot of time on it yet. I'm going to, though.
Okay, well, the guy who does the recordings, my friend Joanna Steinhardt set up the Substack for me. And then me and Randy were talking. He was trying to help me get set up, and that's why he guest starred me on his show to do I Want to Give the World Nachos. And and then after that, me and his guy Mike started talking, and because Mike tried to do a platform for prisoners, and so what he did to help me get more exposure was he hard coded everything I have on Substack. Basically, my Substack account is now hard coded to the prison audio platform. So anytime I post on the Substack, it also goes on his prison audio show. So it's I'm trying to. This is the year of the towel for me. This was the year I turned 42 last September, excuse me, and everything is just going to be lining up. I declare this is the year of the towel. This is things that are going to come together for me. I grew up in psychiatric facilities, group homes, you name it. Turned 18 and they kicked me out.
Yeah, I read that in what you wrote in that Mad in America article.
And I wasn't ready then. And I've done nothing but for the last 24 years now work at becoming somebody that if I could just get somebody to look at me. I've spoken to maybe a dozen different lawyers, and everyone had the exact same response. They're like, you have a very compelling case. And then it's either it's going to cost you this amount, to get me to represent you, or I don't have a caseload. I have too much of a caseload right now. I can't take you on.
The other unfortunate situation for you and many others is your case took place in 2001, 1995. New law came into effect. Had old law still been a thing, you'd be going up for parole right now.
I'd gone home last year.
Wow. You don't have any possibility of parole because parole doesn't exist in Virginia after 1995. Is there anything Is there anything outside of clemency that is a possibility for you? You mentioned a lawyer getting involved in your case. What would they do? Would they try to petition for clemency or possibly try to get your...
Basically give me, a lawyer, because I can write I have a clemency petition. I've got one written up. I had a friend of mine who was a paralegal for like 20 years before he got locked up. He sat down with me and helped me write a really good one several years ago. The thing is, Youngkin was in office, and we already knew damn well he wasn't going to let anybody go. So we were waiting for a good governor to come in. Now we got Abigail Spanberger, so things seem really hopeful there. And so but I also know that there's a statistical difference between being one of thousands of inmates who submits a petition for clemency and, a respected, lawyer name coming forward going, hey, I'm representing this, we're submitting this on his behalf because we think he actually deserves a shot.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, and then people, and unfortunately it always comes down to the almighty dollar, if I can't get clemency and they don't bring back parole, there's been a lot of talk about them trying to get that. That there's been bills they've been trying to get pushed for the last 8 years. When Northam was in office, there was a lot of good stuff happening, and then Youngkin came in and just fucked everything up. But they're trying to bring back parole because they realize that it costs way too much money to keep us in here. I mean, prisons have become more or less a freaking geriatric care center in large parts.
No, absolutely.
It's costing people so much money to keep us here. For some of the things that people are locked up for aren't even a crime anymore.
Yeah.
You got people on drug charges doing 30 years for something that any other state would have given them, 10 months. 10 months and possibly time served, but they're getting, double-digit years, and then, now it's legal in most states.
You're at Buckingham. How is Buckingham for you? It's a sweet prison in terms of things.
It just first, good news, bad news. Good news, hands down, best prison I've ever been in.
It's a level what? Is it a 2 or is it a 3?
Unfortunately, it's a 4.
Really? I didn't know that.
When I came here last December, 2024, when I came here, I've done 23 years in the mountains, 4s and 5s. I come here, it was level 3. And then it transitioned into what they call the Virginia model, which is basically an incentive program. It's basically a prison for, you have to be at least 4 years charge free to even qualify to walk in the door. And now it's supposed to be a whole bunch of programmings and extra incentives and stuff, and that would require powers that be that actually want us to have them. We're kind of in a situation where our warden here is kind of notorious for not wanting anything that he doesn't have to do for us, but we're hoping that'll change things. But it's still hands down. I had a few freakouts when I found out that it officially became a level 4, because I was like, I spent 23 years on the mountains trying to get away from level 4, level 4s and 5s. I'm not trying to go back to that kind of treatment.
Where were you at? Tell me about your track history. Where have you been?
I started off, obviously county jail, Loudoun County Adult Detention Center, the old jail before apparently they demolished it and built a whole brand new facility. I found that out in 2015 when I went back for my habeas corpus. From there, I went to Powhatan Receiving. Was there for 3 months maybe. Then I went to Wallens Ridge, which is level 5, one of the worst prisons in the state. Red Onion is considered a supermax. I have never been there, and while that's considered a worst case place, Wallens Ridge is worse. From everything I've talked to people who've been there. You know, Red Onion, you can be locked in your cell all day, and you're generally left alone. You know, first day out of the hole when I got to Wallens Ridge, I saw somebody get his head beat in. I mean, and that was the norm. So I spent 8 years there till 2010. I went to Keene Mountain. That was a culture shock because it was a level 4. It was a level 4, but it was in what we call the lowlands. It wasn't in the mountains, and I was more or less just left the fuck alone for once. You know, it was brand new to me. It was the first time I wore jeans in freaking 10 years.
Wow.
I was only there for about 9 months. I got transferred to Sussex 2, which is a level 4, and that was more like what I was used to. The guy who ran the mental health department at Keene Mountain at the time was a jackass, and he didn't like that. I don't suffer jackasses lightly. Like I grew up with people like you, guy. People like you for breakfast. You're just trying to. The first 5 minutes of meeting me, he's trying to Sigmund Freud. He's literally trying to pull Freud out and use his playbook on me about my predilections are based in a. God, I forget what stupid shit he said, but it definitely had a reference to my unrequited love for my mother. And I told him he was an idiot, and he took it in his head to he made life difficult for me, and then I ended up getting transferred as a result of it. The Sussex 2 until 2014 when River North opened, and then I opened that place up.
Wow.
2013, excuse me. And I was there when River North started and saw what it could have been. I saw what, the first warden, really, I give him credit. Warden Walls tried. He tried he was like, it's a level 4, but we're going to make the best we can of all this. You know, when they came in and put the property boxes on the bottom of the bunks, he took one look at that and said, that's bullshit. That's not what I asked for. You know, so, because it was too small. You couldn't even put your state issue clothing in all of it, you know. And there was all talk about having to have all of our property in our property boxes. And, he said himself, he said, listen, you keep the cell straight, I don't care where your shit's at. Unfortunately, after him, every warden we had after that was progressively worse. And by the time I left, it was a real shit show. And then I left, came here. In 2024, I came here. And I've, except for a short stint at Sussex 1 due to a clerical error, I've been here ever since. I was at Sussex 1 for about a month. They transferred me due to I had a charge that was never processed, and Richmond didn't realize it hadn't been processed, and that was being let go, and they transferred me because of it. But to their credit, my friend Joanna wrote to them and wrote to Richmond and told them, hey, listen, I believe all the crap that you're saying about the Virginia model incentive and what it stands for. If you really believe it, you need to take a look at this guy's case because he doesn't deserve to get kicked out.
Wow, well, good for that.
And to their credit, they wrote her right back with like, hey, look, we reviewed his case. He'll be on the next bus back to Beckingham.
Wow.
And
yeah, that's stuff that you never hear about.
I mean, when I got here, dude, I got here and I spent the first half an hour of alone time in my cell, turning my light on and off. It was the first time in over a decade that I had the opportunity to control my own light. I actually sleep in the dark now.
My God.
Level 4s, most level 4s and 5s, except for Keene Mountain, the short time I was there, these other places, have a night light on all night. The fluorescent just go down for a little bit. I didn't know how to act. Female officer walked in here the next morning, one morning shortly after I got here, And, she walks up to me, she's doing her round. She goes, "Good morning, Hulbert." And I was like, I'm looking around I'm looking for the setup. I'm looking for, what the fuck is, because I hadn't had anybody greet me, especially an officer greet me in years, with anything like cordiality or politeness or civility, The best you can hope for in most of these places is, to be neglected. The best you hope for is they just don't recognize you. They don't bother with you. I've had a long history and reputation for not taking shit. So when I didn't get a lot of crap from the officers because I didn't look for trouble.
You have 1 minute remaining.
If you got time, I can call you back.
Yeah, let's have one more call. That'd be great.
All right.
All right.
Thank you for using GTL.
Hello?
Hello. This is a prepaid debit call from
I am the Kyle.
an inmate at Virginia Department of Corrections, Buckingham Correctional. To accept this call, press 0. To refuse this call, hang up or press 1. To prevent calls from this facility. This call is from a correction facility and is subject to monitoring and recording. Thank you for using GTL.
So yeah, that's the food's good. The mattress they gave us are nice, and aside from some of the stranglehold that the warden has on our incentives, anytime I start getting the least bit upset about anything going on here, I go, well, this isn't River North. This isn't the Ridge. I'm good.
I want to ask you this. I guess my questions will be all over the place, but forgive me for that. You strike me as the type of guy, and correct me if I'm wrong by this. I look at your pictures. You look like a regular type of guy. You're not a tough guy, some gangster, some hardcore guy. You get to this level 5 prison, which was what, Wallen's Ridge? That's your first spread, was Wallen's Ridge?
That was my first spread.
Now, I know you shared that incredibly tough story about being assaulted early in your incarceration. When you get to Wallen's Ridge, one, is it there where that takes place? But more importantly, what was it like for you? You were a young kid. How old were you when you got to Wallen's Ridge? And what was your experience like getting there? Were people messing with you, trying to test you? Did you have to fight? Talk to me about when you first got to that level 5.
Well, first and foremost, to your observation, yeah, I'm not the geekiest white boy that you've ever met. I am.
And no disrespect saying anything like that.
No, absolutely not. I take pride in the fact I'm a geek. Okay, I love the fact that I'm a geek. I've worked hard to show people in the world that I'm a good guy. I'm a stand-up guy. I stand on what we say here is I stand on mine. But I'm not one of the jackasses looking for trouble. I've had 3 fights, and not counting what happened when I first got there. I've had 3 fights in the entire time I've been locked up. The one thing I didn't really have any much in the way of like having to fight people trying to test me when I first got there, because the optics of the first early on I was with that guy. He wasn't somebody to be crossed, apparently. And then when I was out of it, I stayed out of people's business. The one thing I've learned, and the one thing I tell the young guys when they come in and they seem to need a little guidance is there are plenty of targets. People are happy to make themselves a target. They're happy to be a problem. Let them be the problem. 9 times out of 10, you come in, you keep your nose to yourself, you keep yourself to yourself, you'll find people that you resonate with, and you're not going to have problems. Because everybody's just trying to get by. And when you got the predatory types who are running around trying to extort people and stuff, well, that gets dealt with the way it gets dealt with. Some people get knuckled under, and some people go to the police, some people fight, and they go move on to easier marks. I've always had a quick smile and a joke at my fingertips at a very moment's notice. You know, I call myself the Mad Cheshire for a reason. You know, I'm always smiling, and that's what people know me for my grin. I don't like being stressed out. I don't like talking. I don't like doing stupid shit, and I don't get involved in it. I don't make out to be a badass. I don't make out that I'm the hardest motherfucker walking the street, because I'm not. You know, the few times I've had to get in a fight, they were completely avoidable. You know, and there wasn't much to them. But
I fancy myself a lot like you. When I served my time, I'm not the biggest, baddest guy. I'm not no gangster type of a guy. And, you know, it's almost terrifying to hear your experience, you know, sharing obviously that terrible shit that happened to you, you know, because I can't even imagine being in a situation like that. People laugh and joke about stuff like that. Hell, even I have. But to hear somebody like yourself who, you know, shared that on Red Onion Randy's podcast, I mean, that is terrible. I don't want to even, you know, really get into that at all, but I just want to ask one question because I didn't pick up on that. You said while you were under that guy's wing, was that a situation that kind of lasted for a while? Was that, I assumed that was a one and done type of a deal. That was on like
no, it was one and done. But it's one of the things that, you know, when I was in the cell with him for like the week that I was in the cell with him, a week or 2 weeks, something like that, that I was in there before I was able to maneuver my way out. It's hard to say it as a man, but as far as I didn't know it at the time, but I found out later. People thought I belonged to him.
Yeah, that's terrible.
It was one of those, they weren't going to fuck with me because they weren't going to fuck with him.
You had said in that story too, and this is the last question I'm going to ask about it, and I promise I'll move on. You had said in that story you wouldn't even give this guy credit by putting his name out there. Is this guy still incarcerated to this day? Do you know?
Yep.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, not only do I know that he's still locked up, he was here shortly, and
was that terrifying for you?
It was more shocking the first time. It was more shocking because I'm sitting on the phone and I look up and because I heard somebody at the pod door calling for somebody, and I recognized the voice. I mean, you're not going to forget a voice like that. I look up and there's this guy, with eyeliner and a rag around his head, and at first I didn't even recognize him, but it was just the profile. And he looked right at me, didn't even recognize me.
Wow.
And, had this conversation and then left. And I asked a couple of people, when I found out what pod he was in, I asked a couple of people, like, is that dude? And, they were like, yeah, why? I was like, what happened to him? Apparently a few years ago, he got ganged up on, and they made him a woman.
Holy moly. I didn't realize that. You're saying, because when you shared that he had eyeliner on I thought that's how he was when you knew him. Holy moly. So karma got him.
Apparently.
Yeah.
I try really hard for my own karma not to take pleasure in any kind of thoughts like that because, it happened to me. I can't imagine, it being good for anybody. And I made my peace with it, and I moved on with my life.
Yeah.
And, I'll let other people make the karma conclusions that they want to. But, yeah, I mean, it definitely crossed my mind. But, something really bad happened to him. And my brother out in Alaska, Brandon, when I told him about it, he was like, well, that just goes to show the difference between two of you. It happened to you, and you became stronger. It happened to him, and he became a woman.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hell of a way to word it right there. Wow.
That's how he said it. And when you go to my Substack on Cheshire Madness, you'll find another one that was released the same day as the Red Onion Randy thing called The Price for Surviving, where I talk about that in more detail because that wasn't the first time it happened to me. and this actually talks about some of my dissociative personality traits that I have to deal with, and how that stuff came about, what that does. So if you start looking around on there, you just be aware it's heavy. It's not an easy listen, and it goes into a lot more than just that one instance.
Jesus. Listen, I want to say, like, I'm sorry that happened to you, but what does that even, mean or matter? It is unbelievable that, you've gone through what you've gone through. But I guess, being at these level 5s, hey, this is the stuff that they talked about could and does happen. Me, I was only at level 2s. I was at Haynesville, and then I went to Indian Creek. I went to Mecklenburg for receiving. I was at some level 1s. So everybody there is giggling and laughing about situations like that, including myself being immature about it. You're an individual. You were at these high levels. You dealt with this type of shit in real life. And, for whatever it's worth, I'm just really sorry that you had to experience that.
I appreciate that. And honestly, I mean, I have my days. There are days, like anybody who's ever, any of your listeners, if we ever talk about this on air, your listeners who've gone through this, they can tell you, it could have happened 20 years ago, it still happened. There are days you wake up and you remember it.
Wow.
But
well,
the fact is, I wouldn't be who I am if the bad things hadn't happened. I wouldn't appreciate things as much as I do in my life if bad things hadn't happened to me. Not just that, but the other shit growing up. So I'm not trying to be cavalier about it, but the fact is, it made me who I am. And for better or for worse, I like who I am and who I'm becoming, and I try to make the best of it.
I want to move on, if you don't mind, and forgive me for just doing so kind of abruptly, but this just came to mind, and I do want to switch gears. I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to, just pry for information in regards to that. That's a touchy subject, and thank you for sharing what you did. There's a guy that I know from when I was incarcerated, and his name is Aaron Brennan. Maybe you know him. He's serving 216 years. His nickname is Google. He's at... I believe he's actually at Wallens Ridge right now. I'm pretty sure that he's there. He was at Sussex. He's been at some high level places. His story is crazy, but I bring him up because he was locked up with Sicko Sam and another guy named Jesse Matthews, another high profile, somewhat of a serial killer of some college girls. First question I ask you, do you know of Sicko Sam? I'm sure that you do.
I know the name.
Okay.
I can't say I met the guy.
He's kind of a folklore, people just really interested in his case. It's a pretty graphic case. But regardless of that, who are some high profile or really interesting people that you've met along your time that have really stood out to you?
I mean, as far as like high profile case stuff, honestly, I was the high-profile guy early on. Like most people, were like, "Hey, you're that vampire, right? You killed that guy with a sword." And I got to hear all the permutations of my crime. Apparently, their story evolved. It was insane. The only person I can think of that I met at any that would be like considered high-profile, because I kept a small circle. Was Malvo.
I knew you were going to say Malvo. I knew that's who you were going to say. I was locked up in the jail with Malvo, and they kept him. This was Chesapeake City Jail where they tried his case at. And, that was a huge case back in the early 2000s. It was right after your case. Your case was 2001. I believe Malvo's case was 2003, somewhere around that time. I had heard some wild things about Malvo, just like you said you heard some wild things about yourself being a vampire or whatnot. I heard Malvo was dressing up as a woman. Is there any truth to that?
He wasn't when I met him, but that's not to say anything, because I've run into some people that I knew, years and years ago, and then I've seen them, since I've been here at Buckingham, or when I went to Sussex. It's like, dude, I know you. Were you Wallens Ridge, such year? Yeah. holy crap, I'm Razor Blade. And, oh, hey, how you been? I'm like, well, clearly you've changed.
Really? So you're saying that you've met guys later down the road who have basically turned into women, maybe transitioning?
Yeah.
Wow, I know that
They
has.
are the people are in the process.
Wow, I know that's got to be crazy.
It's jarring when you meet somebody and find out that, because a couple of people I met, you never would have thought this, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but, there was one guy I met, and when I saw that he'd gone through transition, I just asked him, I said, so you finally went through with it? Because he had told me years ago that, he was when he got out, that's where he was going, and then apparently it became, because of the different laws that are in effect for equality, it became possible for him to start to transition while I was in prison, so he did.
Wow. Malvo, I want to go back to that a little bit. Did you know him on a day-to-day basis, just in passing? Like, and if so, what was he like?
I met him face-to-face. I met him face-to-face once, and that was it. And even that wasn't, I sat down at the table with him at Chow, and because it was a seat that was open. And as we're talking, somebody called his name, and I looked over at him and I was like, I recognize that guy from the news. Cool, I know who this is. And that was it. There were literally no sharing of stories, no shooting the shit. Just I just met Lee Boy Malvo.
Did let me ask you this, even though you didn't deal with him or associate with him, what did you perceive his time to be like where he was? Was he kind of did he have some notoriety about himself, some status based off of his crime, would you imagine? Was he a prisoner who was respected because of how high profile his case was, do you think?
I've seen his type come and go. People come in, and they're known for this, they have this reputation. But once you live with somebody day to day, you see what kind of person they really are. And I didn't see him I never got the vibe that, I think that most of the people that initially hung out with him were hanging out because of his, because of his crime, and it was, cool to hang out with him. But he didn't make any noise.
Yeah. Well, he was young too. I mean, his situation, I mean, obviously it was a hell of a lot more than what your situation was, but you guys did have some similarities, both being two young guys. I mean, he was a kid essentially, and he was completely, steered in the wrong direction by his stepfather. I believe it was his stepfather, carrying out those DC sniper shootings. So maybe he was just as, I don't want to say that you were starstruck, but maybe he was like, holy shit, there's that guy Kyle, the vampire.
Yeah, I've always been flabbergasted by the attention that brought. So I don't seek it. Vampirism and things I was into had nothing to do with what happened.
Was there a fan club? Did you have people writing to you based upon your case? Like, wow, I'm intrigued by this. Because I mentioned the guy Sicko Sam. His case was pretty freaking graphic, but that's what his situation was. There was this, this freaking fan club essentially of people who were just, for whatever reason, just really interested in that. Were people writing to you out of the blue?
Oh, yeah.
Really? Wow.
I was, for the first 10 years easy, I was getting mail all the time. It was a running joke in the pod. They'd tell, when they came in, the officers would say, I'm going to just start coming to your cell first. You make my job easier.
What would people write you? What would people write you and say?
A lot of it, a significant amount of it was hate mail. People would write to me and tell me how, all the different ways I was going to burn in hell. A couple of them wrote to me saying, the bad things they hoped happened to me, and those things did. And, then you had the ones that I pretty much diced it up into three categories. There were, four categories. One were the fans, and, they would make allusions to, things that some conspiracy that may or may not have been going on, and how he was a part of it, and they think I did a good thing. There were the people who, the ones I spent most of my energy on were the ones who would write to me and be like, "Hey, I've looked at what's on your case on the news and like what's actually said about it, and it's pretty clear that you were fucked up when you did this, and this that you're not this monster they're painting you out to be." Then you had
You have 1 minute remaining.
The well-meaning soul savers who felt it was their duty to write to me and tell me to turn to Christ, and all the glorious permutations of those letters, but they all came down to the same thing. And then there was the hate mail.
Wow.
When do you want me to call you again?
Yes, so 3 o'clock is a really good time for me. If you want to call me tomorrow, try to call me tomorrow. I'll try to make sure that I'm available to take the call. And
Fantastic.
Kyle, it's a pleasure to talk with you. I'm going to look forward to talking with you just as soon as we can, hopefully tomorrow, okay?
Cool. Take some time to check out Cheshire Madness. See what you think of that stuff.
I will.
Some of it's going to make you laugh.
Yeah.
Catch you later.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you for using GTL.
Wow.